All right, welcome to the Webster Grove School District Board Workshop Meeting for September 29th. Apologies that it's taken us a moment or two to get the YouTube live link working. It should be up momentarily. We won't start any formal business. We'll give it a couple of minutes before we start any formal business, just in case anybody else is still trying to log in there. So
I'm getting messages that it's not working.
I'm just looking over there right now, and I still see the end of the other meeting still up there.
I'm watching it live right now. Sorry.
Okay. All right. I'll bring that down and I'll go back in again then.
Yeah, I'm not getting it either. That's kind of what I was having earlier.
I've just clicked on it again.
Do we have to refresh?
Well, that's what I'm just trying to see. I've just clicked on it again and we'll see what comes up. The wonders of live television.
And Bill, it still says tax rate hearing, the one I'm clicking on in the board doc.
I'm still seeing the tax rate hearing coming up there as well. Okay, I tell you what, I just
on our live channel, I have WGSD BOE Meeting 9/29/20.
Okay, what I'm telling you is that when I go out to the link that's posted on the website, I have the tax rate hearing.
Yeah, me too.
So I think that let's somebody. Let's just if somebody can post something saying we are trying to get this sorted out.
I'll ask Becky Hauser to post it.
All right, that sounds good. Yeah, so if somebody can post that on the YouTube piece, that would be great.
Yeah, I'm getting the same. I just got a message from Bill Cinti. He's inquiring, and I don't know if you want to turn off the ability to chat, but people are able to put comments and are chatting on the Facebook page.
Well, I say it's more. We need to put a chat on the YouTube site, which is that's where people are coming to go and look for things. It's saying I have to create a channel in order to chat. I don't want to create a channel. All right, well, somebody who knows better how to.
I just posted something in the chat.
Hold on.
You did? Oh, okay, good. Thank you. I say we'll. And curiously enough, I mean, when I click on it, it says tax rate hearing there as well. Just in terms of the heading. I mean, there's only the one YouTube link because this is still coming up.
Yeah, I don't know what was posted on there, so I'm trying to get the right link in real quick. Hold on.
Okay. All right. Can we just post a new link to the website, or is it more complicated than that?
It's more complicated than that because you've got direct URL for the live feed with the channel.
Okay, this is why I don't do anything technical for a living.
Bill, I don't know if we want to take it off of live.
Just 1 second. 1 second.
All right, we'll
figure it out.
I'll stop asking questions and let you sort it out. I think that'll be much quicker and easier.
Did I post that in the chat, David?
you could post in the chat to click on the Webster Grove Schools icon, and then they can click over to the meetings there. Like I see it when you go to our YouTube page.
Can you actually get into are you getting into the live feed?
Yeah, it's a different.
Are you getting what we're doing now?
Alex, if you post that in this chat, I'd be happy to post that in there.
It's all live and it's all live and it's on the webpage. Everything's live right now.
All right.
So we're on right now.
Yes.
Pardon me if I just check for a second.
I see it.
It's all live right now.
I just searched WGSD.
Okay, all right, I see things now. Okay, all right. Okay, apologies to everybody for that little technical issue there. We haven't done anything yet. We had the tax hearing at 6, and apparently there was a little snafu when we finished. Anyway, welcome to the September 29th board workshop meeting for the Webster Grove School District. I will start by accepting a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Can we have a second?
I'll second.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. In terms of, just want to make a comment about public comments and the correspondence log. So we have two separate items there. So the public comment, because we are not we're not having public comments being delivered at these Zoom meetings. What we do is we invite anybody who's got public comments that they would like recorded as such to submit them either to me or to the board secretary, Sherry, and we will put them in the public comment. And that's really intended for comments that people wish to make sort of to the broader community. And then the second, and so I'd encourage everybody to take a look at the public comments in the agenda if you haven't looked at them already. And second, then we have the correspondence log, and that is for correspondence from members of the public to the board, and those are recorded there. It's there's not a huge sort of difference, but we all wanted to reflect that some people specifically want their comments to be reflected as public comments, and so that's why they are. And again, we've had lots of comments, many of which relate to the business at hand tonight. I have tried to respond to as many of those comments as I could before this meeting. I apologize that from about 2 o'clock onwards, I was unable to respond, but I will get back to everybody who has submitted a comment to the board in the next. With that, board calendar.
There's no big updates from the last time that we met.
Okay, good. And then setting the 2021 district tax rate, Ms. Fraser.
Good evening. So I won't go through that entire presentation that I just did a few minutes ago, but just to give a review, the district's assessed valuation went from just under $952 million last year to just over $960 million this year. That calculation then brings a total blended tax rate of $4.34.31 is what the calculation came to. The suggestion is to divide that up by fund, with the incidental fund or the general fund getting $2.49.06, the teachers fund getting $1.79, and the capital projects with a remaining 6.25 cents. The debt service levy calculated out to be 68.80 cents. The district does not need to levy all that. The current levy that the district's been levying for the last several years, the 56.99 cents, is sufficient to make all of our debt payments. So the recommendation is to keep that rate the same at 56.99 cents. Adding that to the blended rate would get our total to $4.91.30. And when you look at the calculation, and there is a copy of that was in the tax rate hearing section of the meeting tonight, the breakdown, the residential rate will be $4.10.54, and that is down from $4.11.49 the year before. The commercial rate is $4.57.18, down from $4.91.37 the previous year. And again, that debt service rate will remain the same at 56.99 cents. So now I'd be happy to answer any questions if any of the board members have any questions they'd like to ask.
Okay, so if there are no questions, there is a motion that that we need in order to adopt the tax rate. That is included in the agenda.
I was going to say, are we able to motion to
I can just read it if you like.
I was going to say, because she literally just laid it out, but okay.
I've got it in front of me. You ready?
Yes.
I move that the 2020 operating levy be set at a blended rate of $4.3431 and will be distributed per fund as follows. Incidental fund, $2.4906, teachers fund, $1.7900, capital projects fund, $0.0625. 2020 debt service levy be set at $0.5699 for a total blended operating rate plus the debt service rate of $4.9130. The current year rate will be set by category as follows: residential $4.1054, agricultural $0, commercial $4.5718, and personal property $5.9000.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? And any abstentions? Okay, that passes. Ms. Fraser, thank you very much for all of your hard work pulling that together.
Thank you.
Next, we have the district update on virtual learning.
Good evening to each of you. Tonight, my team and I are going to share a little bit. First, I'm going to start off with some stakeholder feedback that we recently received and analyzed. As we talked about at the beginning of the year, as we entered into virtual learning, that we would seek stakeholder feedback at both the 2-week, the 4-week, and then every 6-week thereafter mark. And the report tonight and some of our action is related to the 2-week stakeholder feedback. So again, throughout this entire process, starting last March up to where we are now, it's a constant information collection, data, research, and everything related. And an important component of that is listening to the people that we serve, our children, our parents and caregivers, as well as our staff. So you've had this information in advance and some of the data, so I'm not going to spend a lot of data in the survey. Our public who's watching tonight or anybody thereafter can go in the board documents and they can get a closer look at the data if they want. After I share that, the different leaders in my group who have facilitated some of the problem solving process will share kind of where that group is at this point in the journey. So again, just some of the feedback as you've heard, as you've seen, overall, the teachers and the staff in the Webster Groves School District are doing an amazing job with virtual learning. We've been clear since the onset. We knew it wasn't going to be the same level of quality as in-person learning, but our staff are working like crazy, very thoughtfully, very intentionally, working as new teachers, even the 20-year, 25-year veteran, to try and figure out how to care for kids in this environment is very challenging. Caring for their academics, caring for their social emotional well-being. The results that I'm going to share to you, primarily the parent caregivers, and I labeled them, as you know, are at the top, the students at the right, and the staff down below, and there's some where not all are included. We had approximately 2,100 parents, caregivers that responded. That doesn't necessarily represent every single family because it's good because we asked for feedback for children at different levels. So a single parent could have responded for their 3 children. And so we don't know exactly how many households this reach, but I will share that the 2,000 number is pretty high when we talk about surveys we've put out recently for boundary lines, for going for Proposition E. It's a pretty good return. We had, of our 6th through 12th grade students, we had 744 who responded. The majority, obviously you can see, of those responses came from middle schoolers, followed by high schoolers, and we had very low response rate from 6th grade. We only had 12 students who responded. And then our survey responses at the staff level, were pretty spread out. Again, when we first analyzed these results and you look at it, we were actually pleased. While in a typical year, if this many people express disagree and strongly agree for their children's educational experience, we wouldn't be as happy with the results. And not that we don't want these results to be better. That's one reason why we're surveying people with the frequency that we are. But we were very pleased with how our staff have responded and the level of support they're providing kids. Engagement, interaction was an important component of our virtual learning this time around. We heard that from everybody loud and clear, especially as our parents and caregivers, is that they wanted it to be a little bit more like school as best it could be in terms of interactions between our teachers and our students. And again, the feedback from everybody in terms of the interactive, engaging daily learning. And I love this one, the feedback with the feedback and support that I get from my teacher, that my child gets, that I'm able to give for my students. This is huge because it's that personalized piece that's a priority for us as district staff members.
John, do you have a PowerPoint that you are trying to share?
Are you serious? Oh my goodness.
Yes, I am serious. We can't see your PowerPoint. Yes. So if you can perhaps just very quickly go through the slides that you've described so far.
Can you see
Sorry,
them now?
I wasn't completely clear. Yes, I see it now. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
So if you can just very quickly, just make sure everybody gets to see that.
Yeah, this is just the response rates that I spoke to. And again, these docs are in board docs. I apologize.
No, that's fine. I apologize for not asking you before.
Yeah, this is the data regarding interactive, engaging daily live instruction from my teachers, or what I'm able to provide. Again, this is just the evidence of that great work that our teachers are doing. Again, here's that personalized piece that individual kids are receiving feedback and support, which is so matters to us. In this virtual space, when you're connected on screens, it's not as easy. And the survey data is overwhelming in terms of those efforts. Level of comfort with technology overall is pretty good, but it's still, when we have this many people disagree and strongly disagree with platforms that we're using to educate kids, connect with kids and their social emotional well-being, this is an area of improvement that we need to attend to. Connections, this is a big piece too. Again, it's harder to connect in the virtual space. Our teachers are doing an amazing job trying to connect, but even they will note that it's difficult in the virtual space because it doesn't allow for a lot of those informal interactions. The time just doesn't exist for those personal, meeting them at the door. How'd your day go? How did that game go last night? Their efforts are there, but I think the data clearly reflects a challenge that is. The independent learning time, that's at asynchronous time. Staff are being clear in their communication to both the students and families how that time is supposed to be used. The communication, overwhelmingly positive as well. Communication from both the teachers, from the schools, as well as the district. There's always room to improve from the district perspective, and I believe our school's perspective, and we continue to listen to the feedback. So this is the quantitative data. We also read, I can promise you that we read every single comment from each of our stakeholders, and some of our problem solving stems from some of those comments that were made. So the four themes that kind of emerge from our experiences in the virtual space, as well as what people have shared with us and what we've learned, are scheduling, both at the school level, the teacher level, the district level, communication tech, student services and supports, as well as those connections, that student staff connections. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Adams, who will then be followed by some of my other team members. Just tell me if you need me to advance the slide. So Dr. Adams, in regards to scheduling. Jason, you're not connecting. Kind of a night for technology.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay. Sorry about that, everyone. What I shared was good evening to all of you. My scheduling team, our problem solving team, represented kindergarten through 12th grade in terms of building administrators. And we looked at the survey data, and then we reached several conclusions based on that survey data, both looking at the student data, the community data, our families data, and then our staff data. And so one larger recommendation that we are making K-12 is we are recommending 1 half day of asynchronous learning each week going forward. That half day of asynchronous learning would be used from the teacher perspective for continued planning, for continued collaboration, and at will for any self-directed professional learning that they would like to engage in continuing related to virtual learning. In addition to that, from a student lens and a family lens, one of the themes was how much screen time and time away, opportunities for some flexibility within the schedule. And so this afternoon, even though it is deemed as asynchronous learning, it would include some independent tasks that students would have to be able to still complete because it is still a part of a school day. It's still a part of our instructional time. However, there would be a much larger degree of flexibility within that time and would allow students to be able at all levels to step away from the screen, but it would also allow for any makeups or other things in terms of assignments, maybe that were started earlier in the week, to have time to be able to complete it, to complete those assignments within the middle of the week. And so that's why we are scheduling that time on a Wednesday instead of a Friday or a Monday. So it's really meant to be kind of a deep breath for everyone in the middle of the week so that we can continue moving forward on Thursday and Friday. Our proposal is that, again, this would be Wednesdays and that we would begin this half day of asynchronous learning beginning next Wednesday, which is October 7th. And we would continue this for any situation where we were in a virtual format moving forward every Wednesday. Also, principal teams within each level. So the elementary principals worked together, the Hickson team worked together, Staggered worked, and then the high school worked to make any tweaks or changes that could be made within their schedules. I will share that the largest body of change that we are able to make would be our Hickson Middle School schedule. And the Hickson administration will be sharing that with families beginning tomorrow. And that would go into effect beginning next week. And so a lot of that had to do with just the level of rigor and the amount of time that students had between their classes and so forth, between the live instruction and the asynchronous learning and the way that it flowed across the day. We were able to get creative, and they really did a great job of looking at what other districts are doing. And so they will be rolling out a new schedule beginning tomorrow. They'll be sharing that with families, but then the schedule will go into effect beginning next week. At the other levels, small tweaks have been able to be made, and those will be coming from different building administrations if there were changes that would be made related to the schedule. But for my particular group, the one big takeaway is the half day of asynchronous learning beginning next week. That would be on Wednesdays for all levels K through 12.
Next up, Pam and Kathy.
Okay, I'll go first. We met with a small group to talk about how we can increase and improve communication at all levels, what things can be done to improve the experience for students and families, and how can we improve the tech experience for everyone. Next slide. When we talked about communication, we decided that developing a flow chart of when messages are communicated by the district and when they're communicated by the building would help, since there seemed to be overlapping messages that were confusing families and students. We also decided that streamlining communications to families, especially middle and high school students, would improve things. Often families were getting 6 and 7 messages from different teachers all on the same topic. We're also asking the teachers list their names in the subject line instead of just their class name and hour. And now I will turn it over to Pam.
Another thing we talked about was the district-wide Canvas homepage and some expectations with just basic information that shows basically above the fold information such as the teacher's name, the Zoom link, the course grade, and then contact information. So that is consistent throughout the district. We also discussed making sure that we're sharing the link that you see on the screen there. That is a link to our tech troubleshooting tips for parents and students. There's some good information on that page. Things like if you're having audio problems with your Chromebook, information for parents, if your Zoom mic volume isn't working right, and things like that. Okay. Then another thing that was discussed is maybe some short videos, short 1-minute videos would be helpful for families and for our employees. So some of the topics that we came up with was Zoom for audio settings, Canvas for parent access, SIS grades, notifications in Canvas, Clever, and then home Wi-Fi.
Mr. Thomas, Dr. Lyles with Student Services and Instructional Supports.
Good evening, everyone. Like Dr. Simpson said, Dr. Lyles and I worked with a group of administrators and curriculum coordinators and looked at some areas of student services and how we can better support our kiddos. So kind of what we did is we looked at the data and we saw that some of our students were really doing well in the virtual realm, but we also have a group of students who are not doing so well, who are struggling. So we looked at that information, and then we also looked at what supports we can provide and then how we can blend the two together. So we developed some criteria in which we could identify students in need of support, and then our recommendation is that we're going to invite those students back into our buildings to get some help to help them be more successful. And the 4 category areas that we're going to use to identify students are in the academic arena, engagement, technology, and social emotional. So with academic, we're going to take a look at kids who have current identified learning plans in place. So this could be students with IEPs, students who are receiving reading or math support, just other academic areas that we've already have documentation that they need help in these areas. We're also seeing that our students, for various reasons, are struggling with engagement. So those will be a group of students that we'll be inviting back. And then we also have a population of students who, for some reason, their technology is just not consistent on a regular basis. So we want to provide them with a space where they can have good connectivity. We can help troubleshoot problems that they might be having with their device and so on. And then we're also, we have kids that we work with on a social emotional basis. And these would be students who maybe are part of a group that our counselors or social workers have been working with, who have been identified through a success team process or so on. So again, our recommendation is that we will be bringing these students back on campus, and that they will be doing their learning through the classroom, through the virtual world of their teacher or their courses, and that there would be an adult in the room with them who can help them troubleshoot, problem solve, monitor, make sure that they're staying on task. So we've been identifying students who match this criteria, and this week we will be reaching out to the families of those students and inviting them in. Our high school has actually started already bringing kids in, and next week we would like to start bringing in our 3rd through 5th graders. And this would be for children in the virtual learning plan, because this would be something that would be in place until we are back in person with instruction. And then other things that
John, I'm sorry. You mean the children who are part of the responsive learning plan?
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you
for correcting me on that. And then other things that we're having to plan with that is that we need a space for these children And then for children who qualify for transportation, we will be providing transportation so they can get to us, and then we'll be providing meals for them as well.
Thank you, John. The final part was my part, student staff connections. And I just wanted to make sure it was clear that while it was administrators who are part of some of these problem solving teams due to having a little bit more flexibility with our schedules to do that, we did reach out and had 3 Zoom sessions with staff, pre-K through 12th grade staff last week, and had staff contributing. They received a similar PowerPoint, contributed their thoughts to each of these, and helped to formulate some of the decision-making around them. My portion has to do with those in-person visits, those connections. Again, people doing a great job to do this in the virtual world, but really feeling like if we are safely able to do so, allowing those connections to occur in person in our schools or our particular location. So my team got together, really started thinking about what the possibilities might be, but then we narrowed our work to creating a protocols and formats to support them. So first and foremost, of course, like anything we do with having students back, making sure that all of our safety and health guidelines are followed with whatever we do. While outdoor visits will be preferred, that we would allow for indoor visits to occur if a rationale for the indoor visit was justified, and we had a safety plan in place to make sure that that the adults that are in the school or the students that are in the school don't come into close contact or anything with the group that's coming on campus for a limited amount of time. We ultimately decided to create some type of sign up for staff members who want to have this experience for their whole class or a limited group of students that they would complete in advance, and it would go to administrators and possibly a few others to sign off. That form would include the staff members, the adults who would be present, the group of students, what would be the purpose of the gathering, the location at school. Specifically, it's going to occur on the playground, it's going to occur in the setting, or if it's a place other than school, because we talked about the importance of possibly a neutral site if our students have difficulty maybe walking the whole way to school or getting to the school, being mindful of that. Making sure that a safety plan is in place to make sure students are cohorted. Again, respecting that distancing while they're there. In the event we would have to contact trace, that we could do that with efficiency and effectiveness. And then making sure as part of whatever we complete that there's notice on the adult who's completing it of adherence, that we're going to adhere to the safety and health guidelines, as well as just making sure that we made every effort possible and give some examples of how to be inclusive, such as making sure that students have the transportation to possibly get to the school. That's it. That's a lot of the work that's happening, and we'll open it up to the board for any kind of comments or questions you have.
I have a quick question, and it's probably already been answered. On those Wednesdays, the half days, I was speaking to one of the counselors in the district, and they mentioned wanting to have some more time with kids, but they were leery with the current schedules about pulling them out of classes and that type of thing. Is those Wednesdays, are those going to be the days kind of used for more counseling activity, I guess?
So John, I can start off, and then John M., if you want to join.
Thank you.
So the idea behind the Wednesday of asynchronous time really is for everyone to somewhat disconnect. It's an opportunity to kind of do makeup work for teachers to have planned additional time, that sort of thing. However, John, I know, has worked with the counselors and continues to do so in terms of trying to provide individual supports and individual opportunities to connect beyond just that Wednesday time. And part of that thinking really was what led us to this idea of the learning monitoring groups that John presented on. So John, if you want to step in and share a little bit about some of that piece.
Yeah, so when I spoke to our counselors before we started the school year, I really encouraged them to keep their curriculum, they're scheduled the way it is. So they need to work with teachers to make sure that they're getting in front of kids so they can deliver that counseling curriculum. And then especially with our elementary students, their day begins with some community building time. So that's a perfect time where they can get in front of groups of kids and work with a class, work with small groups, work with them on an individual basis, in addition to some of those other flexible times. So they're being creative in how they can work with kids. They're doing it during some asynchronous time as well. And then for kids that will be coming back as part of that learning monitoring plan too, our counselors can go check on those kids as well. Since they will be in the building, we can check on them and get a temperature of how well they're doing and how we can better support them.
Is there any thought, because there's a lot, these are just things that I'm hearing, and even having talked to my own child's pediatrician, since the depression level seems, or the anxiety level, like the mental health level of kids seem to be really, unfortunately, at stake. Is there any thought as to maybe beefing up some of our counseling, or giving some extra time, or something else that could possibly happen? Maybe even some groups or something for kids, some more extra social emotional support?
Yeah, and we've talked at various times over the past several months about trauma training that we'll be doing with different trauma teams within the group, and then with our staff, and that stuff that will be ramping up in October. We've got dates set with Alive and Well Communities, in which our trauma teams will be trained this month, and they'll also be pushing out a general this is trauma information that will be going out to all staff. I was actually communicating with Alive and Well today about getting that really active and going.
And I'm assuming there will also be an opportunity for that to be shared with just families in general, in case they need some resources of their own. Awesome. Okay, thank you so very much.
And if I can just add to that, if a family or a child is struggling and needs assistance, please feel free to reach out to your building principal, to reach out to your building counselor, and we are happy to problem solve and to think through how we can best support your child. Please don't let a schedule stand in the way of you reaching out and access
to. Awesome. Thank you guys so much.
Thanks, Keita. That was a really good question. Dr. Adams, I have a question about the asynchronous Wednesday. First, thank you. I've been seeing my husband work just as hard over the past few weeks as he did in the restaurant industry, which is to say he's working all day Saturday and Sunday, as well as into the evenings. But I'm curious, as a parent, who is going to, like, what is that asynchronous time going to look like? Like, is it her teacher who's going to tell us? Or is it the building that's going to tell? What is that going to look like?
Sure. So basically, without going into a long explanation, what we did each day, the asynchronous time is kind of blended at different levels with the live instruction. So it's live instruction, then asynchronous, then live, then asynchronous. What we're going to do is follow similar to what we would do with an early dismissal schedule that we had several weeks ago, where it's a shorter period of live instruction in all of your periods. So you're still meeting with your teachers in the morning. You're still getting that opportunity for live instruction. It's just a longer period of non-screen time to either complete your independent tasks at a flexible rate, opportunities to make up any assignments from earlier in the week that you haven't had a chance to finalize. It will look different at each level. So a high school experience, they will have coursework because it is still a part of a school day that they will have to finish up, but it's not so much required to have the pressure of attending every period all day long. There's a degree to which we could provide some flexibility within the school day. For a kindergartner or first grader, it could look like a degree of independent reading, doing some independent writing, some handwriting practice, some math practice, but then also an opportunity to step away, have a little outdoor playtime where you're not required to necessarily be on the screen. And so, yes, a lot of that will come from the classroom teacher or from the different course content teachers at the secondary level in terms of what that would look like. But again, the whole idea behind it, K-12, is for some degree of flexibility for both teachers and for families and students, most importantly as well. I hope that answered your question.
It does. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hey, so just to clarify, so is this virtual only we're speaking to? Is this everything? Just, it's a little confusing given next we're going to be talking about potential reentry.
So yes. So I don't want to jump into the next conversation, but yes, we have thought through how this fits. And so for any level that would remain in the virtual program, this would be the consistent schedule going forward for the Wednesdays. If and when there were a situation where a level would go back in person under the responsive plan, but some students would remain in the virtual program for the rest of the semester, that virtual program would continue to follow this asynchronous schedule on Wednesdays. Students moving back to an in-person situation, if that's what we choose to do, would not have that half day of asynchronous. The virtual environment is very different, as our teachers have noted, as our families have noted. And so this half day of asynchronous time is really planned around the idea of a virtual environment moving forward.
Thank you.
And John, whatever we decide here, we're still going to, for the people who are in the virtual program, will we still have the surveys going forward, just to make sure we're keeping in touch with how they are doing in their program?
Yeah, we will definitely, and possibly also continuing, if we do return to person, also having a survey for those groups as well. It's a lot of surveying. I mean, but it's our one way to connect with a broader audience. And I think, yes. So the question is yes, or the answer is yes, rather. And the second part of that is that it's important for us, regardless of decisions made on re-entry, that, it's possible that we'll, if we go back in, that we'll be out again. That's a possibility. And so how do we care for everybody involved in this, our kids, our staff, our families, as best we possibly can, if we have to navigate between these different worlds of the in-person and the virtual space. So, yeah, and tonight, what we're sharing right now don't require any approval or vote. They're actions that are in motion. And if you had any thoughts or concerns, definitely would want to hear them from you.
I actually have one more quick question. I was looking at your in-person visits. Has there been talk or thought put towards tutoring with that? Like, is that kind of included in that, or anything?
Yeah, thank you, Keita. Yeah, it started off as thinking more of just connecting, just relationship building, but we talked about making it the purpose of the survey serving a broader purpose, such as things like that. So yes, we are looking at it being a tool that could be used for a variety of different possibilities.
I have a question. So can you go through again what the process was to identify who's going to receive those extra services? Is that teacher recommendation? Can parents reach out? What's the process for that?
Yeah, so Joe, we're looking at kids who we already have some documentation that demonstrate they need some learning support. So, and Katina may want to speak more on this, but like a child with an IEP, that's something that we already have in place. And while we're not looking to bring back all children who have an IEP, just those students who it would be really hard to duplicate in the virtual realm, the services and supports that they would need.
Yeah, Joe, and I would just kind of build on that. There's a number of people that would say that they would, their kids would fare better academically Are they having issues with tech in their own spaces? But we're really looking at some of the inequities that existed pre-COVID that are even magnified post-COVID, and trying to really serve those kids and families as best we can. And they have developed some good criteria using some existing criteria and methodologies that we use to identify and support kids for kind of being tools that we use to get these children into our schools and better support them.
Thank you.
And how do you measure engagement? Because according to everyone, their kids are not engaged. So how do you measure engagement along that same question?
Yeah, so our buildings have been very active in terms of reaching out to families. So using the data that they've compiled from home visits, from phone calls they've made, communication with teachers and so on. So we're using that data to determine the students who we're concerned about their engagement level.
Is that kind of, and I'm just from my own, you have to draw me a picture sometime. Is that also based on like grades and stuff that's turned in or assignments? And like, I guess maybe I'm trying to clarify the definition of engagement.
Sure.
Maybe I should ask.
Sure. So again, this could be a real long-winded question, but our answer, we have, as part of our Tyler system, we have a component called Tyler Pulse. And with our middle and high school students, there's a part of it that's an at-risk indicator that takes a look, that compiles a whole lot of data, including grades, including attendance, including a lot of different factors, and then develops a score that we would look at as a tool to identify students who we think would benefit from being on campus with us.
Okay.
Would you recommend parents that might be concerned now, given the circumstances, start with their teacher and their counselor, just if they're not in, you know, the system, or you don't have data on their student?
Always, I would encourage a parent to start with their child's teacher in terms of if they have any concerns that they want to share. I mean, the problem that could happen is if we would love to service all the kids that we could, but you know, we also have to maintain safety protocols for everybody, but we also have to think of staffing, because we have teachers who need to continue to teach in addition to supporting kids. So the staff members that we're envisioning monitoring and supporting our kids that we're inviting back are not necessarily those staff members who are providing a lot of direct instruction and Zoom and so on a regular basis.
I think that's something, if I can add to this, just to clarify. So the learning monitoring program won't necessarily be, in many situations, a tutoring opportunity or an opportunity to get reading services, that sort of thing. It's more of supervising while a student is engaging virtually with their classroom teacher, engaging virtually with their reading specialist, because a lot of those pieces have to continue. So just to clarify that for everyone.
Am I hearing or understanding correctly that, I mean, I'm not sure how you know if your child has been identified as a kid who's in need of support, of in-person support. So would you say that it's, as a parent, that it's our responsibility to advocate? And if so, how do we go about doing that?
Yeah, so our buildings have already identified some kids and are in the process of doing it, because, you know, we're like, we don't have all of our reading data back yet. So as we get that information back, there may be some students who we realize have regressed or not shown the progress they needed to from last spring to now. So those would be students that, you know, we may see that data as we get it and be making calls to those parents. But again, I would, you know, if parents are concerned about their child, yeah, I'd have them reach out to their teacher, to their building, and then they can assess that request.
And for parents of kids with IEPs, do we need to convene an IEP meeting to make this happen?
continue. You want to take that one?
IEP meeting, it would be the same process. So as we're identifying who those students are who've had some difficulties, like the example Dr. Adams gave, there may be some students who are not able to access their learning in the same way because they require adult supports, for example. So they may be in person accessing those adult supports, and their teacher may be virtual with them while they're in school, for example.
Yeah, I guess I'm just not clear on, I mean, SSD, I think, has taken a position that they're not going to provide in-person support for students unless the students are in Webster Grove's buildings. So to get my kid in the building to get SSD support, is that an IEP meeting request? I'm just not sure what the process is.
It's not the same process. So the students that we're talking about bringing in, that we're identifying and will be reaching out based on that criteria, though that encompasses students with IEPs as well. So it wouldn't be an IEP team decision. We would be reaching out to those families.
So again, as a parent of a child with special needs, we should wait to see if somebody reaches out to us to find out if our kid's going to be coming back in person for any portion of the day.
So John,
and if at some point we don't hear anything, I guess I don't know what the next step is.
That's a fair question. John, is there a timeline by which we would say a parent should hear from us, and if they haven't, we should be, they might reach out if they feel they have a need that we haven't identified?
Yeah, the high school has already started reaching out to families, and they've brought students back this week. So they've already done that. And then elementary and middle school will be reaching out probably as early as tomorrow to families. And if a family again is concerned, then they should be reaching out to the building and expressing their concern with their teacher or their principal, and then they can make that decision whether it's appropriate to have their child return to in-person. And again, like Jason said, it's not going to be a lot of, it's going to be more of a monitoring situation. There may not be a whole lot of direct tutoring or instruction going on. That will still primarily happen through the child's assigned teacher.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Any other questions regarding the virtual component?
Just a quick suggestion. John, I know you had to flip quickly through the beginning number of those slides. Can you mention again, where will those slides be available? Because I know you were listening to parents on that survey. Oh, you're
muted, John.
Those thank you. Those slides are available on board docs. So anybody who wants to see this entire presentation, including those slides, can go to our main webpage and go to the board page and board docs and access them. And if they just want to reach out to me, I'm happy to forward it to them as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, in which case we will move to the next component, which is the return to school plan. And just before John starts, I will note, obviously received a lot of emails from parents looking to provide sort of feedback on the experience that their children have had, and then just had a lot of conversations also just with people as well, and I know that that's the same for all the board members. So just want everybody to understand. Yes, I mean absolutely. You know we have been hearing, all the board has been hearing these things. So just one other thing, and so there was a question as to what the best way to handle any recommendation was. My feeling is that although in theory the resolution we passed before would give Dr. Simpson sort of the ability to go and take what action he thought was appropriate. What I'm suggesting here, and you'll see it in the agenda, is that presuming the board agrees that we pass a resolution that sort of very explicitly lays those sorts of things out. So we can have a discussion about the motion and whether that's the appropriate way to go once we've heard the presentation from Dr.
Thank you very much. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Let me see where it is. All right.
I still see you, John. I don't see a screen.
You're going to see a screen soon, hopefully. Do you see it?
Yep. Yeah, we've got it there now. Thank you very much.
Yeah. This isn't. Let me do this from the beginning. All right. See the screen?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Good evening again to everybody. I'm going to have about 30 slides to share, move through them with efficiency, but effectiveness. So tonight's presentation is around return to school planning in our school district. And while the intention, when we originally made the decision to go into the virtual space K-12, July 29th, our thinking at that point was to come back to you with a recommendation for what would happen next with second quarter on October 9th, and then look to possibly move or shift students on the 23rd. One important component of that, as we've articulated all along, is the importance to be responsive and flexible with all that we do on changing circumstances, data, information, as well as lived experiences. And so because of that, we felt the need to move up our presentation to you this evening. Some of the factors that going into our decision-making this evening are, of course, since the onset of everything, we've been very closely looking at the COVID-19 data, both broadly on a national level, but more closely at a regional St. Louis County level, as well as data that we have particular to our school district community and some of our surrounding districts. Also, factors that go into what we're sharing tonight are lessons learned through the first 5 weeks, things that we've learned based on our own, things that we've heard from families, from children, from staff, everything. Also going in tonight is our Ambrose Center. Our Ambrose Center has been up and running since the end of August with children and with adults quite successfully. We have since July 1st had high school activities and less athletics that have been going on following all the protocols put out originally by the task force, then by St. Louis County. We've been quite successful with that, thanks to the structure that's put in place by our coaches, our sponsors, as well as the seriousness with which our student athletes and our activities, kids and activities have taken it. Have been weighing on the advice, have been listening to the advice of medical experts, again, since the onset, people that are informing us on a weekly basis through regular conference calls with superintendents, focus groups. I've spoken to you on occasion of the different epidemiologists, infectious experts that I have been listening to and conversations with. And then lastly, the feedback that we've gotten through surveys and other forms of communication. So I mentioned the focus group, the task force weekly, and I'm not a participant on this. I've been on another task force as it relates to COVID as the superintendent. I'm not on this particular one, but I trust my colleagues who are part of it. There's a group that meets on a weekly basis with medical doctors, infectious disease people, superintendents, as well as officials from St. Louis County. And to support just programming and discussions regarding reentry. I'm sorry, I'm shifting kind of some things so I can see. These are some of the general parameters, suggestions for considerations for reentry, making sure that plans are in place for screening, for illness, for exposure, making sure that we're cohorting students as best we can, keeping students and adults distance wherever we can to the extent possible, knowing in some spaces a little bit more difficult than other, avoiding large groups that mix people together, and then developing plans if we have to navigate in between spaces, whether that's a school or district or just a group of kids that might have to go out on quarantine or might be suspected of. I just wanted to share some of the current data as it relates to COVID. Again, COVID is going to be around for some time. I heard recently from a lot of experts as it relates to this about the importance of knowing that it's going to be around for a long time, and that while some people want to hold on to the vaccine to open things up, they express that a mask is going to have a higher rate of minimizing transmission than even a vaccine will, which was kind of interesting to me. But this is looking at the 7-day rolling average of new cases. With each of these data, you'll see a drop, which is encouraging. The data on all the slides, if I was able to, started with the day we made the decision, the board approved the decision to move to an all virtual space as to where we are now. Again, some of the data that we have, this is looking at St. Louis County by age group. And it's looking at that the case rates by age group on that 7-day average. And you will see, with the exception of the slight increase in the 0 to 4s from the day we made the decision until now, there's been a marked decrease in the number of cases within St. Louis County at each of these age groups, which is encouraging. Here's the data as it relates to transmission. It's been around 1 for some time. Again, you could see that big dip from where we first made the decision to go to the virtual space to now. Transmissions, you want to be below 1. Again, transmission or infection rate is looking at the number of people that a positive case will infect as a positive case. The data is pretty favorable at this point for something like this virus. This is the positivity rate, how many people who are tested are diagnosed as positive. The goal that has been established for this is below 5%, which currently as a county, we're below 5%. Again, you could see the contrast with where we were a few weeks ago. So at this point, and let me get through the whole presentation so you could hear about all the levels, but at this point, the proposal that we're bringing to you tonight is a recommendation to return our kindergarten through 2nd grade students to in-person learning, those people who selected the responsive learning plan. And the proposal is for 5 days a week, every single day for the full day. This is what the transition to in-person would look like if we get the go-ahead from the board this evening. Tomorrow, we would send out a communication to staff and families. Again, there would be a lot in between of communication, but then on the 12th and 13th, we would have our K through 2 students engage in asynchronous learning. Our K through 2 teachers would have time and staff would have time to prepare their classrooms and spaces. And then we would start with the first day of school, October 14th. Which is a Wednesday. Why K through 2nd? At this point, the real simple truth is that they're the least independent. They struggle the most with the technology and online learning. And while I feel very confident with our ability to keep people safe within our schools, not just K2, but our older schools as well, the data certainly favors the fact that they're the least to test positive, as well as to transmit as far as our K through 12 student body. So 5 days in person versus the hybrid. When we originally set up the in-person learning, the responsive learning plan, we had these 3 tiers, which one was the all virtual, one was a hybrid, some type of combination, and the other was the 5 days in person. So why are we at this point electing for the 5 days in person? Again, a lot of this has to do with expertise. And the experts have articulated over and over again that our schools, with the standards and oversight that we're going to have, the adults who are going to support with the supervision, are going to be some of the safest places that our children and that our adults can be with our regular cleaning and sanitizing, with our non-negotiable expectation of mask usage, with our commitment to physical distancing and cohorting. This is significantly better than safer than most settings. And in contrast to the hybrid, in the hybrid model, we would be able to keep safe while our kids are in our care. But when our kids are not with us, they're someplace else. And whether that is in a pod where they're exposed to many other people or who people they're traced to, and maybe not wearing a mask, or daycare or childcare centers, as I kind of mentioned in the next bullet, they might also be under the care of other adults, some maybe with pre-existing conditions. But we feel that the schools are the safest place to be, and you could see that a lot. The asynchronous days too, in that hybrid model, there's a portion of time where children are not going to be engaged by the adults, whether that's 2 days a week, 3 days a week, or whether that's a half day of every day. That has childcare implications on a number of our families. Again, like I said, may be provided by different people. Those hybrid days, those asynchronous days, are also not ideal if you can get and not do them because of the special programming involved for our students. Our students have a wide range of special programming, and if it's able to be provided in the same setting, the same staff, same location every day, there's an advantage to that, as opposed to getting my reading support from a reading specialist online and then coming for my 2 days and having it face-to-face. We'll do it if we have to, if we need to, but it's ideal if it's 5 days. Also, the planning for asynchronous learning is challenging for teachers. I know Ms. Keller mentioned this earlier in our talk about her own connection and experience seeing this at play with the teacher. She knows quite well, but it's very challenging. The asynchronous is for our teachers. Even in the virtual experience, the amount of time our staff are taking to plan and format lessons for a virtual space, to upload and edit videos, it's a lot. And so it would be a lot for teachers to plan 2 days for face-to-face for 2 separate groups, and then also plan for those groups independent work for the other 2 to 3 days, let's say. And also, we know that our children, the research is clear, most of our children, the benefits of in-person learning and support far outweigh those of the virtual space. And again, like we've articulated all night, our teachers are doing a fantastic job. Our counselors, our support staff are doing a fantastic job, but it's undeniable that there's a difference in the in-person learning and support we can provide for our kids. And I will just kind of going back to what Ms. Quinn shared a little bit ago, when you're talking about when kids are not in our space, and what has also been seen as you look at the rates of children who are going to hospitals and there have been incidents, the increase in incidents of abuse, the increases in incidents of depression, of anxiety. Also the fact that we are not, as a staff that cares, we're doing everything we can to outreach to our families, and we'll continue that. But our inability or the difficulty that it is to know what insecurities or difficulties families and kids are experiencing if we're not in their presence. It's a challenge. So some of the things, practically speaking, we created a manual that we're going to revise a few things and send out this week to families with regard to in-person learning. First, masks for all, no exceptions. That is really pretty clear, is that just like our preschool students are doing beautifully right now, our students have to wear masks, our adults have to wear masks. That's critical to the safety of everybody and the spread of COVID and other things, is wearing that mask. Really being mindful of the social distancing and all that we do. Our target, our threshold is always going to be the 6 feet, but there are going to be circumstances where we're not able to make that, and we will follow applying all the guidelines from the county, from the state, in terms of there may be those circumstances where 3 to 6 feet is going to be necessary for space, but making sure, again, those precautions such as masks are in place in those circumstances. Cohorting students. As much as possible, we're going to keep students in the same cohort, the same small group, regardless of where they are. This is, again, is important for their safety and their well-being, even with masks on. It will also enable us to effectively contact trace, to support, to work with the health department to identify people who may need to be quarantined for some time. Cohorting will be an important part of our experience. With very rare infections, no other adults are going to be allowed in the building. This is going to be really hard. And a place like Webster Groves, I know when I came from Parkway, we're small and we're a walking environment for a lot of people, obviously not all. And but with rare exceptions, if we're really going to treat this seriously, which we are, we have to limit any kind of exposure. So having adults in the building is that are not our staff is going to be a very rare exception. And we'll have protocols around that. Hand sanitizer in rooms, other strategic locations, such as entering schools and other spaces around the school, protocols for cleaning, intentional pathways and door usage throughout the school. Again, I will reiterate that the experts, the infectious disease epidemiologists will tell you that, again, if you wear your mask, that's gigantic. There are going to be situations where our kids are going to be within 6 feet of kids for 15 minutes in hallways or walking through doors. But just as another layer of precaution and just to support with some of our processes, we're going to have things laid out so that it's clear for our children and our adults, such as pathways and door usage. Lunch in classrooms with our kindergarten through second grade students. Again, that's a cohort thing. So we're mindful of how we do that. How do we make sure kids are spaced for lunch? There are going to be some situations where maybe we can't, because at lunch we want to guarantee at least the 6 feet and beyond. If we're going to have students that don't have masks on, we're not going to be okay with the 3 to 6 feet. It's got to be at least the 6 feet and beyond. And if we're not, there may be some situations where our students will have to eat in separate spaces to make sure that we get that 6 feet and beyond. Students not utilizing drinking fountain, utilizing personal water bottles. If they don't bring their own, we'll have some to provide them. Precaution rooms. Again, you've seen this in our return to school plan. It's essential that we have a nurse's room, a clinic, as they're often called, for regular nurse things, such as administration of medication, such as scratches that occur on the playground, all those kind of things. And then we have to have a precaution room for students that have atypical COVID-like symptoms that they're demonstrating, or adults, a place that's separate from the others to ensure kind of that, again, that safety. Pre-screeners in place for stakeholders, and then really clear and clearly communicated protocols regarding cases that might occur, possible close contacts that occur, making sure that those are known by the adults, including our staff, as well as our parents and caregivers. Dr. Wiley is going to talk a little bit about our health protocols.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Okay, great. So what you see before you right now on this screen actually came from Washington University. They put it together with a group of nurses in order to help in the process of us just really being able to determine how we want to support children. Of course, we want to make sure that everyone is safe. However, it is also important for kids. We have a lot of kids, as we talked about earlier, who are suffering. This virtual learning is just not working appropriately for them. So as much as we can have kids in a safe environment at school, the better. And so this diagram here is for nurses. I believe this will also be shared via the nurses to their own school community, just to provide a context for families, and then for the nurse to know what to do if a person has been exposed to COVID and/or they're exhibiting symptoms. It's imperative to note that some of these symptoms that are listed on here, that some of these symptoms are going to be common for some kiddos. So for example, this time of the year is allergy season, so it may be common for a kiddo to have a runny nose or a little bit of congestion. If that is the case for that student, then that is not necessarily considered COVID related. However, it is a common symptom for that student. So these symptoms here are, of course, going to be symptoms that are kind of out of the norm. You'll see down at the bottom where it has one low risk symptom. And then what do? You stop there. Do you send home? The child returns, and then it goes down to 2 low risk symptoms, and et cetera, et cetera. So it's a guideline. It is not necessarily the protocol for every student, because we have to understand that some kiddos have medical needs or medical conditions where some of these symptoms could exacerbate their current medical needs. But this is definitely a blueprint for the nurses to utilize and for them to kind of try to have as much as a streamlined approach to how they're going to support kiddos who may become ill due to COVID symptoms. If you want to go to the next slide. This slide also is an algorithm, a school nurse algorithm that they're planning to utilize when they are screening students for potential COVID symptoms. We just want to continue to reiterate here, as we talked with the nurses on yesterday, that every student that exhibits a symptom does not necessarily mean they're going to test positive for the virus. And so they are planning to utilize this algorithm to kind of allow them to flow through a process. But you'll note right there in the center says evaluation by a healthcare provider. So for those kiddos that may exhibit those symptoms, the parents will have this system to utilize. They will definitely contact their parent or guardian. And then we're asking that parent or guardian to contact the child's pediatrician or physician for guidance. And then based on what that medical professional provides, we are going to follow the guidance of the medical professionals for our students. And so that is kind of what that explains. It's a little bit more, it's not as friendly. So this will be more of an in-house document that the nurses utilize versus the first one. If you want to go to the third screen or next screen. This also here is a protocol that has been shared not just with nurses, but also with human resources people and other administrators. It's just really to assist schools with what the health department is determining as a close contact, as well as those students who were identified. It gives us a guideline of what to do should a student or should a teacher or whomever test positive for the virus or being tested for the virus, and then we find out that they are in fact positive. It is a bit of a flow chart. It lets you know, during the contact tracing process that the nurses will go through for students and that we in HR will go through for adults. It does provide a framework by which we can work on in order to help us determine what we should do, who we should contact, and how, right? So if you see at the bottom left-hand corner, there are numbers to St. Louis County Health Department, and we will utilize that. I utilize that whenever we have those situations where we need to call the St. Louis County Health Department for an employee who, tested positive or may have been exposed to a positive case. So I know that is the question, what are we going to do, right? If a student tests positive or if an adult tests positive, our initial goal is going to be, we're going to isolate that individual, make contact with that person's pediatrician or doctor. We ourselves are going to contact the St. Louis County Health Department, give them all of the necessary information for them to guide us in making the decisions so that we are not making those decisions in isolation. We will be receiving that medical feedback from the St. Louis County Health Department and from the person's physician. And then with this guidance here, we're going to use all of that to make decisions for when a student is quarantined or an adult is quarantined or a class, whatever that may be. There is not a cookie cutter approach to it because each COVID situation is going to be different. Each person's medical needs are different, and we're going to have to approach it this way. But this is at least a guide for us so that we can be able to do that work.
Thank you, Sandy. Pam, you want to talk about the cleaning and sanitizing, please?
Sure. So this is an area that we are taking very seriously. We've developed some protocols, as Dr. Simpson mentioned earlier, that we'll be following. So occupied spaces will be disinfected nightly. High touch areas will be disinfected periodically throughout the day. So those are areas like light switches, hand railings, the water fountains that won't be used to drink out of, but maybe they're being used to fill a water bottle. So things like that will be disinfected periodically throughout the day. A spray bottle of disinfectant and paper towels will be placed in each room in the school building, so there can be hard surface disinfecting as needed. That's for adult use. We will not ask our students to use that disinfectant. Playground equipment will be disinfected every morning before we have students on the equipment. So it'll be disinfected each morning that we have students. If it's a Saturday or Sunday, we will not be disinfecting that equipment. HVAC filters will be changed at a minimum of on a quarterly basis in order to ensure that they are working at their maximum efficiency. Thank you.
Thanks, Pam. So that's kind of what we're looking to, again, move to get a recommendation or approval tonight to bring our K2 kids back October 14th. We also want to set a tentative timeline for 3rd through 8th grade return to in-person learning. And it's tentative because we want to kind of learn from the gradual implementation of K2 and then kind of move forward. That's a recommendation from the county that's similar to what some other districts have done. And so this is what the return of those this is a tentative transition to in-person. When we spoke with our staff, in particular our issues committee, they just talked about the value, and certainly the parents would want to know, what dates are you thinking about? What are you planning? What are you working towards? And right now with our 3rd through 5th, the return to in-person would start on October 28th. And then with our 6th through 8th graders, the return would be November 11th. And then again, giving those teachers and staff the time to make those transitions in those particular spaces. Why the staggered return? It's kind of what I kind of just reiterated to you right there is one, starting with the K2 and then slowly building up will allow us to problem solve with smaller groups of children. And then allowing us to be successful, learn from our failures, learn from our successes, and then to continue to scale. It will also assist us with our classrooms. There's a number of modifications that have to happen in some spaces, not some spaces, and we don't have a lot of staff. We're pretty lean here in the Webster Grove School District. And so we'll need all hands on deck to help modify spaces in order to accommodate for that, the social distancing. And so that's the reason for the return. One thing that, again, like I articulated, everything is flexible, everything was responsive. And so some of those things may change. The one thing that I did promise our staff is that if we are going to make a change to the schedule, that I would allow them at least 2 weeks notice to do so, because our staff have different things professionally as well as personally that may be affecting them, such as their own childcare and their own families and problem solving around those situations. With the high school, our high school has been very active in terms of planning for a return to in-person learning. I don't have a date to put out at this point. It is possible that the return to in-person learning at Webster Groves High School, if we feel that we are capably and safely able to do so, could happen within the window that I just shared with you and return to the other grade levels. So it doesn't necessarily imply that they will not be coming back after the middle school. They could be coming back, for example, at a similar time or the same time. The commitment, again, our team did an amazing job, my teammates, I should say, of really planning for educating kids in 2 separate spaces, in both the responsive learning space as well as in the virtual space. Our staff, as I've said over and over again, have done an amazing job of serving kids in both those spaces. Some of our staff are actually having to navigate both those spaces at this time, which is a challenge, but there was a tremendous amount of coordination and scheduling and adjustment that had to be made. And so as we kind of articulated before, that top slide is when we initially went to the board with the recommendation for K-12. Down below is when we had parents enroll in either the full-time or the responsive learning. We noted that you're committing to be in one of these settings for that entire semester, knowing that any kind of disruption to that would really be disruptive to the adults, to the kids that were in the different settings, and the such. So at this point, this is kind of our stance. While we do have opportunities for students who are in the responsive learning space to be a part of a virtual program, not necessarily a Webster Grove School District virtual program. We are really holding to these particular expectations and really need to, if we're going to have groups of kids back, keep distancing in place, and again, keep kids in classes as best we can across the district in both spaces. Some of the answers to some of the questions, we are going to, the week of November 9th, we're going to be reaching out to families because we asked you to commit. We asked our families to commit for the entire semester. But we said at the semester, you're going to get an opportunity to switch if you want to switch. That switch will not necessarily, you may not get the same teacher when you switch, but you'll have the opportunity to switch from responsive learning to virtual or from virtual to responsive learning. So the week of November 9th, we're going to ask families to declare for the second semester after the holiday season, what setting you want your child to be in, your children to be in. We are at this point working to provide an after-school adventure club experience for as many families as we can. I say that with some level of commitment that we feel it's important to do, again, speaking to a number of the inequities that some of our families are facing, but also mindful of the critical importance of being able to cohort and distance children. Our Adventure Club programs cannot possibly look like the programs that we had last year at this time with 140, 150, 160 kids, a number of the kids utilizing singular spaces. So our team is working towards that and hoping to provide that. And we're really going to try our best to target families where the need is most, where the need is greatest for those particular families. That's hard to do. And I'm hopeful that our community will rally around those families who have the greatest need and not request that space so that they can access it. Our recommendation, this is an important one. Our recommendation for 6th through 12th may not be 5 days in person all day. Hear me, that's desirable. That's the hope. That's the work towards. But we have to make sure that again, that we can create spaces that are safe, programs that is safe within the physical walls of our building. And that's something that we're still trying to ascertain and to problem solve at those particular levels. So again, the goal is to get them all in 5 days a week in person, but there's a possibility that we may have to do some form of a hybrid at those levels. And as always, we reserve the right to be flexible with our planning. We're called to that. We're responsible to doing that. And we're no different than any other school system around. Data dashboard, the data that we're looking at, again, you could come to, we showed this before, you can come to look at the St. Louis County data. We update this regularly in terms of the indicators that we're looking at. And you can see what's happening in the county. We also are going to develop something where families, something similar to this, where families can see, staff can see the number of students in our spaces on a weekly basis who have tested positive, or the number of students that are quarantined. And we're going to do that as a district overall, kind of listing what that number would be so people can check that out. It's a lot of information. It's a lot of important work, and open it up to any questions or comments that you have at this point. I did want to note that at this point, there is a recommendation that we did provide that would allow you to endorse or authorize the K2 kids coming back, as well as authorize me to administer discretion, me and my team, to bring back the 3rd through 8th graders and really the 3rd through 12th graders when we feel the need and the time is right.
Okay, so what I think we'll do is this. I think we'll start off just with any questions about the plan. And Amy, I see you, and I'll come to you first. So we'll ask any questions about the plan to begin with. Then, when we've dealt with anybody's questions, we can discuss the motion that is there and see if people think that's appropriate or whatever. So, Amy, you want to go first?
Yes, thanks, David. I actually have a question and then a comment. So my question is, when we were having these conversations prior to the start of the school year, we were hearing from many staff members about their concerns about returning to in-person instruction in the middle of a pandemic. And yes, some things have changed and we know more about the virus than we did then, but